Oh, okay. Just a sec.
Good evening, dear friends. Today is Thursday, the 21st of May, and we're in Pine Mindfulness Meditation Hall. I'm going to talk to you about right diligence this evening. And this is a very pragmatic and down-to-earth series of steps about the kinds of seeds in our consciousness that we cultivate. And there's quite a lot to it. And there are things to consider around right diligence. I have them up at the top here. Intention, insight, and transformation. Our intention is our volition. It's our motivation. What motivation do you have for your life? Do you want to be rich and powerful, or do you want to be free? You have to be clear about intention. Insight, as you all know, is a vital component of right view. Right view is the dynamic force that goes through the entire eightfold path. And what it requires to make it motor is the presence of right concentration and right mindfulness. With those two drivers, if I can put it in those terms, with those two drivers, our attitudes and perceptions change into insights. And then something different travels from right view through the rest of the Eightfold Path. So we have to bear in mind the significance of insight. And the third thing I want to bring to your attention that underlies our understanding of right diligence. Once we practice the four components of right diligence and practice them deeply, it will lead to transformation. We will see that there are fruits from our practice, and we can actually taste them and feel them because they're in our actions and everyday lives. We see that our practice has enabled us to handle things so much better than we could have done so, say, 3 months ago or 6 months ago. So the transformation aspect is a check on how are we doing. Is our practice useful? Are we refining our consciousness? So the aspect of transformation and tasting the fruits of our practice is very, very important. But I want to begin really with seeds in consciousness. You see here, the diagram here. We can divide our conscious initially into two spheres. The top part is mind consciousness, our daily logical apparatus by which we try to interpret reality and often make dreadful mistakes because our perceptions are skewed. But I'm not going into the full complex of consciousness. I just want you to distinguish between mind consciousness, our everyday logic and rationality, and store consciousness, which is the deepest level of our consciousness. And the store consciousness does as the name implies. It stores everything. The good, bad, the ugly, and the very ugly. In Buddhist parlances, there are 51 mental formations, which means there are 51 seeds in store consciousness. But more seeds have been discovered since the time of the Buddha. And we can roughly divide the seeds that we're going to be talking about tonight into wholesome seeds like love, compassion, joy, equanimity. And on the unwholesome side, the negative seeds, we've got things like fear, anger, greed, and hate. And when something activates a seed in consciousness, it can be our mind activating it, or it can be a circumstance we're presented with that can also activate it. The seed travels up into mind consciousness and it becomes a mental formation. And as a mental formation, it has the option of acting in your thinking, your speaking, and your actions. So once the seed comes up into mind from store, it becomes active and will play out. So we have to take care about what kinds of seeds we focus on and ignite into our mind. How is this going to affect our thinking, our speaking, and our action? And we can identify 4 principles of right diligence. And they're very simple, they're very down to earth, but I hope to show in the course of this Dharma talk that they're exceedingly powerful and very basic to our practice. Let's start with the first one. The first principle of right diligence is to nurture wholesome seeds in store consciousness, so that the wholesome seeds will manifest in the mind as mental formations and be ready to be made active. And how do we ensure that we water wholesome seeds? It's through our diligent daily practice. Our commitment to the 5 mindfulness trainings, for instance, is created through practice with the Sangha, which is a baseline for the fruits of practice to arise. Or when we go on retreats and we're looked after beautifully, and we can just spend the time on watering and nurturing all the wholesome seeds around us, because we are surrounded by other people doing their best to do that very thing. So the first one is very straightforward. We can see that we will water our wholesome seeds if we are practicing deeply and diligently, whether it's in the Sangha or a retreat or everyday life. We will start to see that the fruits of our deep practice are the aspects that come alive in our mind, which then become active in our life. That's fairly straightforward and kind of obvious. Now we get into a more difficult realm. The second principle of right diligence is do not nurture unwholesome seeds. In other words, we do our best to not give a chance to the negative seeds to manifest. And where the battlefield occurs is in our relationships. Let me get into this on the next chart. We're looking at the impact on relationships of when we fail to follow the second principle. When we don't refrain from watering negative seeds, what happens in our relationships? With friends, with loved ones, with partners, with children. If we don't have the capacity to refrain from watering negative seeds, we basically create World War III. Because if there's an argument or a difficulty, especially between two people in a relationship, they will hurl insults at one another's weak points, soft spots, sensitivities, and the whole thing builds up, and it can become very nasty and harmful. So we have to be aware of a number of things. I can say to my partner, I have some seeds in me. I have seeds of jealousy and anger. Please don't water those seeds in me, because they will make me suffer. And if I suffer, I will make sure that you suffer also. It always happens. So couples, if they are intelligent, will come to a place where they'll sort of make a treaty between themselves, that they will commit to not watering the negative seeds in the other, because it becomes a runaway express train. Leads to split-ups, separations, divorce, and violence. So not watering one another's negative seeds is a very important part of relationships. Often we kind of joke, but we're really attacking our friend, our partner, our child, through a sort of sarcasm and humour. And it's not sarcasm or humour at all. It's an attack upon their negative seeds, making them feel small. And we must learn to stop that. Because if we do nurture the negative seeds in our partner, our good friend, or our child, they will make sure we experience the same kind of hell in one way or another. So it's very important that we learn to refrain from watering negative seeds in one another. Because when you water a negative seed, you make it stronger. And there's something else in the dynamic. You make it available to other negative seeds to glom on into the combat zone. So your refraining, your act of refraining is huge, because you're shutting down the negative seeds and you're not allowing others to manifest at the same time. That dynamic is something we've probably all seen in the disputes, arguments and conflicts that we've entered into. It's not just one negative seed that comes up, it's a whole gang. And that's when things become very ugly and out of hand. And also, if we have been hurt and injured and suffered from childhood neglect or assault of one kind or another, that's stored into a whole series of negative seeds. But what we do with our mind is often to pay a visit to these old memories. To look at it as a movie that we're watching over and over again, and every time we watch it, it gets worse. And this brings me on to something here that I think is very, very important, and I've talked about it to the community before. This is the two-arrow teaching. The Sallatha Sutta from the Theravadan tradition. And this particular teaching is basic training in the Theravadan tradition. And it's where we encounter a very severe pain and we suffer from it. It feels as though a hidden archer has fired an arrow deeply into us, and it hurts. It really, really hurts. And then seconds later, a second arrow comes to the same spot, and it hurts 100% more. It's agony. But who fired that second arrow? Is it a hidden archer? No, it's not. It's you. It's me. What we add with our mental mind is anger, anxiety, fear, dread, and a whole bunch of other things that we inflame the small ember of hurt into a raging forest fire. So the Two Arrows Sutra is basically about learning to reduce the mental part of our suffering. If we're suffering, don't add on to it. See it and recognize it just as it is, without putting the heavy load of our mental attitudes, our anxieties and our fears upon it. We have to be aware that we must take care of our fragility. We're cracked in many, many different kinds of ways. So there's a potential for breakdown if we allow the second arrow to be fired. And there's two things that we have to do. We build a foundation of practice. This is so that we can have a different response to the first arrow, which is our pain and our suffering that arises. And we learn how to refrain from firing the second arrow. That's the first case. The second case is if we do fire the second arrow and we're inflaming our suffering, then we must know how to take that second arrow out through our practice. We breathe in and recognize the initial pain. That's all. If we've added on fear, anger, then we can do walking meditation and recognize that we have allowed fear and anger to inflame the first arrow of suffering. So the two arrows suffering is really very, very important. And you can all think of the many times that you have fired the second arrow and not been able to pull it out, and how dreadful you have suffered from it. But with our practice, we can recognize, oh, I've just fired a second arrow with my fears, with my anxiety. So I'm going to remove that mental add-on. And the second principle of right diligence really leads us into acting on the firing of the second arrow. We recognize that what we have done. We reduce the mental add-on, and we apply the four principles of right diligence to our practice, our everyday practice. And you'll see why that works in a moment. Because what we're doing with the different components of right diligence, we are selectively watering the seeds in consciousness. We're choosing to water and nurture the seeds in our consciousness that are wholesome, that are positive. And when we dwell on past suffering, we don't inflame it. We look at it, we recognize it, and if we are wise, we'll see how far we've come because of that suffering. Out of that suffering, something else has emerged within us. You know that wonderful saying, no mud, no lotus, no suffering, no awakening. So it's to recognize and to deal with the pain as it is without inflaming it with add-ons. So the two arrow teaching is a very important one. I'm just giving you a very brief overview of it. So we make a commitment to selective watering of seeds in consciousness. We are in the second principle making a commitment to refrain from watering negative seeds. And we have to come back to the idea I mentioned before about our relationships. If you water my negative seeds, my dear, and make me suffer, realize that I'm sure as eggs are eggs, I'm going to make you suffer. We want to avoid that. We want to make it a non-valid option. And we make that a non-valid option by deciding not to water the negative seeds in our good friend, our partner, our child. Because we'll see from the dynamics, when a negative seed manifests, it's got a chance to grow stronger. It also offers a chance for other negative seeds to emerge and for them to grow stronger. So when a negative seed manifests, we recognize it and help it to go back into the store. Otherwise it'll grow into a monster and rule your life. So recognize and smile to the negative seed and bring up its opposite. If anger has come up, bring up from your store consciousness the seed of loving kindness or the seed of compassion. Walking meditation is a wonderful way of acknowledging that there's anger in you, and you're going to use compassion to walk that anger out through your feet into the earth. Walking meditation is very useful in this instance because it's active. When you're agitated, when negative seeds have arisen, it's very hard to sit on the cushion and be cool. But you can walk. You can walk your anger out by bringing in with your breath the seed of compassion. And slowly, slowly, that anger recedes. So what we've got here with recognizing, smiling to the negative seed, we see that the Buddha is proposing for us a way to change the CD. The CDs that harm us are taken out, put on the shelf, and a different CD is put in. But this is a very specific exercise. And if we can always remember the two arrows teaching, we realize that with this second principle of right diligence, we've got a way to deflect that second arrow, and we have a way to refrain from it ever being fired. Because the person who fires it is you, it's me, and we really can't get away from that. Then we come on to number 3. We have an intention here to water the seeds of joy, compassion, and understanding every day. Because when we are doing that, we are giving them a chance to grow stronger. We're also giving a chance to all the other positive seeds in store consciousness to come and join the party of joy. So understanding will play a visit. Compassion will come. Equanimity, love, that will all come and join your deliberate watering of joy. And it's really very important to see who's around you. Because your manifestation of joy in your mind consciousness, this enters your thinking, your speaking, and your acting. And you share it with others. It's quite wonderful. So you have to see, who is it that you have around you? Do they support your wholesome, positive seeds? Or are they just waiting to pull you down and engineer some negative seeds? And here I go back to the Hopi prophecy, which I really do like. And I'll just read one little bit from it. The elders say we must let go of the shore, push off into the middle of the river, keep our eyes open and our heads above the water, and look around and see who is there with you. So you have to see, are you in a company of friends who support you, or do you have a workplace that is highly toxic and you can't stand? And what can you do about it? So, number 3 is creating a treaty of happiness with Dharma friends. And I have a formula for you. 3 is fine, 2 doesn't work, and 1 is useful, and 4 is wonderful. What am I talking about with this set of equations? I'm talking about cornerstones. Cornerstones is where you have 2 or 3 Dharma friends with you. It always has to be a minimum of 3. 4 is fine, 5 is wonderful, but the minimum is 3. 2 doesn't work because there can be too much complicity. And doing it on your own is not sharing anything with anybody. But with a cornerstone, you take time to meet outside of Sangha gatherings and days of mindfulness. And the point is to cultivate harmony and joy. Enjoying a mindful cup of tea at a cafe. Doing walking or cycling meditation along the Ottawa pathway. Singing together. Painting together. Quite a few of the women in the Sangha have started to go on paint nights. And this isn't a gossip fest, it's attention and concentration and mindfulness while they follow the instructor's guidance to paint whatever has been presented to them. So cornerstones are vital. Cultivating joy and equanimity with your Dharma friends. Nothing can be stronger. And if you've had a really bad day at work or at home, you pick up the phone and you connect to Sangha friends, and you can just say, Cornerstone, need one, something like that, just so that you can be surrounded by people who are going to cultivate your positive seeds. And it does wonders for a Sangha, because when you're with a cornerstone, you're out doing your walking meditation or your mindful meal. When any one of a cornerstone comes back into the Sangha, they bring that energy as a signature. So cornerstones are a building block for Sangha practice and life. Now this brings me to the 4th principle of right diligence. When a wholesome seed comes up into mindfulness consciousness, into that level of consciousness, keep it there for as long as you can. Because the same dynamic applies. If you have a wholesome seed in mind consciousness, you're giving it a chance to get stronger, and also giving a chance for other wholesome seeds to also arise and get stronger together. So once a positive seed is in the mind, try and keep it there for as long as you can. This requires a lot of concentration. You must be aware this seed is in your mind and you don't want to let it go. It keeps your mind consciousness clear and beautiful all day long. And this is where you encourage your friends to help you as you help them. That's what I'm talking about in terms of cornerstones. That this is a wonderful source of assistance and support in the Sangha. So we can see from these 4 principles that I've briefly gone over that right diligence is the practice of selective watering. I would call it something else also. I think right diligence is giving us 4 steps. Excuse me a moment. It's giving us 4 steps to do intelligent gardening of the mind. And the gardening metaphor was brought home to me when I was preparing for this Dharma talk. I came across a wonderful article by Cheryl Wilfong. This was in Shambhala Sun, March 2011. And she's an organic gardener and is making parallels between how she operates as an organic gardener and how she works as a practitioner. And I'll read some of her very pithy wisdom. Now we're eager to translate our spiritual practice into our already too busy lives. So how can we harvest the fruits of practice right now? This probably applies to all of us. Anybody here who doesn't have very busy lives? You're all very busy. So there is a recognition there. And she goes on. When trying to transplant a spiritual practice, however, we first need to clear a space in which to sow the seeds of mindfulness. Our lives might feel more like a loudly babbling stream than a still forest pool. We can try to sustain a way too big garden of busyness, or we can tend only as much as our tender hearts can open up to. Reducing stress, like reducing weight, means subtracting something. In our garden, the first thing we practice is the weeds. In our daily life, we might consider, for instance, how much news do we need? Really, how much news do we need? Weed your news intake. Limit it to once a day. How do we discriminate between weedy activities in our lives and skillful ones, such as meditation, that will sweeten our minds? These are the 4 steps of right diligence. And here she gives some really good advice. Try weeding out junk mail, catalogues, and unsubscribing from non-essential mail lists. Write down 1 or 2 things you might consider weeding out for a week. TV, movies, shopping, a voluntary fast from your credit card. Keeping a space clear for meditation requires determination. For instance, the 4 principles of right diligence, it requires, first and foremost, your determination to see it through. Neighbouring activities will try to encroach on our cleared space. In gardening terminology, such encroaching plants are called spreaders. If you give them an inch, they'll take over the yard. Seemingly urgent incoming information will try to crowd out our important relationships, including our relationship to our meditation practice. Consider dividing in half the time you spend social networking. Clear some space in your home as well as your schedule. Set up a cushion or a chair. Use a nearby shelf as an altar. Then commit to sit at a regular time in this regular place. Set a timer for 20 minutes on your microwave or cell phone. If you don't have an established practice, I recommend beginning your meditation by softening the heart. This is what Pema Chodron speaks about very frequently. First, visualize a place of still water. This feeling may last for only a second. Notice it. Next, express gratitude for the blessings of your life, even the common things that you take for granted. Third, practice loving kindness towards yourself. This is tenderizing of the heart. And it's like preparing the soil in our garden. We turn the soil and add the compost of caring. Then we plant the seeds of mindfulness by focusing on the breath, sounds, or sensations. You know what your houseplants look like if you forget to water them for a while. The same thing happens with our meditation practice if we neglect it for a couple of weeks or even for a few days. We water our practice by sitting daily. We support our practice by sitting weekly with a group. We fertilize our practice by reading Dharma books or listening to Dharma talks. Occasionally we take our practice to a retreat center, where it may flower or bear fruit as a plant will do in a greenhouse. On retreat we have just the right conditions, a schedule, nutritious meals that are prepared for us, and only the belongings that fit into one suitcase. Transplanting season does come to an end. The spring or fall of our lives can be conducive to transplanting a meditation practice, which I'm sure all of us are doing in one way or another. While the summer of our lives may be totally booked with work, family, and paying off the mortgage. In the winter of our lives, which leads to our deathbed, the elements of earth, water, heat, and air are likely to be out of balance and possibly uncomfortable. That's when the mindfulness we've been nurturing all our life, the wisdom we've gleaned from our practice, will support us just when we need it the most. And I think that's a wonderful piece about gardening. And the reason I read these excerpts to you is that it's following the 4 principles of right diligence. This is a practice. And right diligence, I think, is quite marvelous, because it's saying this is what you do. Very, very precisely. And there's also many planting of seeds in others that we never have any idea of how they pan out. And I want to tell you a story that I gleaned from one of Jack Kornfield's books, where a school teacher, a history teacher, planted seeds in her class that had the most startling consequences that she certainly did not anticipate. She was talking to her class one sunny June day and saw that she did not have their attention. So she said, okay, put away your history books. I want you to get a sheet of paper and a pen. Write your name at the top, and then the name of all your classmates. And beside the name of your classmates, write down something about them. And the students, oh, well, this is strange. But they did it anyway. They thought about their fellow classmates, and they wrote what they thought about them. And the teacher gathered them all up. And several weeks later, she had pasted all the comments they'd made about one another all on the same page. So each person got the 16 or 17 comments that had been written about him or her. And the teacher had had quite a wonderful time doing this, because the comments were wholesome. There was not a negative statement. So the kids were kind of stunned by this, also delighted that their classmates kind of liked them. And that was it, or so everybody thought. And after the kids had all graduated, the teacher got a message from the mother of one of the boys. He had enlisted in the military, and he'd been killed in the first Gulf War. And she asked the teacher to come to his funeral with all his classmates too. And at the ceremony, the boy's mother came over to the teacher and said, well, there's one thing they found in his chest pocket. And I would like to give it to you. It was the piece of paper with all his friends' statements about him. So he had carried this in his pocket into combat. So the teacher was very moved by that. Then someone else came up to her, pulled out her purse and said, I've kept this. Then somebody came over and said, I kept it because this became my wedding vows. And it went on like that. All the kids had treasured the seeds that were planted by this teacher. And they're all transformed. Now what the teacher found, she was a spinster and getting on in years. She found an immediate family that gave her so much joy. So the exercise that she'd participated in which involved the planting of positive seeds in a whole classroom, had all kinds of consequences that she could never have even hoped for. So what this tells us, keep on planting wholesome seeds in our friends, our loved ones, our children, our neighbors. Keep on planting those wholesome seeds, because you never know what's going to happen. suppose Carol and I do that with all the young kids on the street. We always remember their birthdays and their Christmas, and their parents say to us, "Oh no, you shouldn't do this." And I say, well, I jokingly say to them, but you know, this is an investment. When I get too old and crotchety and I can't get around, your kid is going to drive me around the city in your car. Which is not too serious, but I'm going to try it anyway. It's just that I fully expect that something that this teacher experienced with all her kids, we will experience with the children on this crescent here. So organic gardening in the mind is an amazing career. If you want to organic garden in your mind so that you foster wholesome seeds in your consciousness and you foster the wholesome seeds in the people around you, particularly young people, who knows what the ramifications will be. And when you practice the 4 principles of right diligence on a regular basis and you start to taste the fruits of practice, extraordinary things begin to happen. Things are presented to you that move you on in a very surprising way. And I want to recall a particular instance. This was about 10 years ago. I did a sweat lodge ceremony and a nipi with Native American brothers and sisters. And this was a sweat lodge that had been called by a senior elder in Ontario, because he felt that there was such a disconnect between humanity and the Earth Mother, and he wanted to conduct a ceremony to reverse that, to consolidate a connection between humanity and the Earth Mother. So he had invited different people that he considered to be Earth Guardians, and I was very humbled that I was included in this gathering. The ceremony took place in northern Ontario. It was at the end of spring, no, the end of winter, just before spring. And a special sweat lodge had been built, and we went in, crawling in on hands and knees and saying our name as we went in. And there are 4 rounds to a sweat lodge. And it was startling. I'd never experienced anything like it. The prayers that were said about the earth and humanity were so deep and so moving. I felt every word from every other person there. Their words could be my words, and my words could be theirs. This was a collective watering of the seeds of determination and care for the Earth Mother. And it was very deep, and I was kind of, not shaken, but I think the right word is, I just relaxed into it, because it was like experiencing no separation. It was as though one mind had appeared through this collective watering of the deepest commitment we could make to the earth. We also spoke about how we could put this into action. But the feeling of one mind wasn't the epiphany for me. I thought it would be, until I left the NEP. I came out, and during the 4 hours that this ceremony had taken place, there'd been about a 2-inch snowfall. And there's a beautiful crescent moon, and the snow was still gently coming down. And we walked up to where we were camping, and I turned around and looked back, and I saw our footprints in the snow. And for me, this felt as though I was looking at the first footprints on the new earth. That was my feeling. And I beckoned to my companions to turn round and take a look. Words were not appropriate. I just waved, and they all looked round, and we just all smiled. We all felt the same thing, because we knew that from that point on, from the commitments we'd made, from the one mind that we had shared, business as usual was no longer possible. And I've been reflecting on that particular experience quite a lot today and yesterday, and I'm coming to the conclusion that when we do water the seeds, the wholesome seeds in others, encourage them to live fully, this creates epiphanies. So there is something about keeping in mind the wholesome seeds that drive us and sharing it through our example, through the way we connect, through the way we care. And I think our world requires this as never before as we mature spiritually. We become steady, we become lucid, and we become epicenters just by keeping wholesome seeds alive in our consciousness and nurturing wholesome seeds in the minds of others. And it's based on doing the work of awakening. The 4 principles of right diligence are to be practiced, not thought about. Because as we practice each of these 4 principles, we're moving further along the line of awakening. It takes work, and right diligence is part of that work. And that's the request I make of all my friends here. Please put it into practice. And notice the difference when you do. Because we can listen to the endless chatter of delusion from the rivers of samsara. There's no transition or transformation possible. Let us choose to do the work, be present in this moment, which heals all moments, and let's join together and listen to a wonderful chant that Carolyn will sing for us about the ocean. We don't need to listen to the samsara and the endless chatter of rivers. We just need to be one with the ocean. Thank you for listening to me, and Carolyn will close this Dharma talk with this beautiful chant.
Silence is the ocean, language is a river, 100 voices inside say, that's enough for now. When the ocean calls to you, don't run to the river. Listen to the ocean, that's enough for now. Silence is the ocean. Language is a river, 100 voices inside say, that's enough for now. When the ocean calls to you, don't run to the river. Listen to the ocean, that's enough for now. Silence is the ocean, language is a river, 100 voices inside say, that's enough for now. When the ocean calls to you, don't run to the river. Listen to the ocean, that's enough for now. Listen to the ocean, that's enough for now.